Here's a frightening thought. The two of us in the Department of Education.
Oh my God, would we have some fun? We'd
have a blast.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the building would still be standing, but
well, we'd make everybody go out and be in school, so the building would be empty.
Yeah.
Getting lots of cute chat comments.
Some great comments, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, Tony, believe it or not, we are live. So I think it's time to get going. And I'm really appreciative for everybody taking time. We've never done this before. And when I thought about doing something for the first time that's fraught with ambiguity and risk, where we have no idea where we're going, I said, I got to do this with Tony Wagner. and so Tony and I are here, and he doesn't know this, but I'm going to, it's been a lifetime goal for me to introduce Tony Wagner.
No,
please don't. Yeah. We've done so many things together. So I have to brag a little about my friend.
Way bad, way wobbly.
Yeah. So Tony and I first got going in education. I think this is interesting. You may not, but anyway, bear with me. No, I got interested in education maybe 10 years ago. And when I started to talk to people that really seemed in the know, like in the same week, I had 3 different people say, if you really want to understand what's going on in the education, if you want to read the best books ever written about education, check out the work of Tony Wagner. So I ordered them all and I binge read. And then I'm like Joe Bag of Donuts. I'm from nowhere. And I sent Tony an email out of the blue. And I said, I'm going to be in Boston. Any chance you could get together for breakfast with me? And he could have easily blown me off, but he's so nice. And so we got together for breakfast. And boy, from there, it's just turned into a long-term friendship. We've collaborated on a lot of things. It's been wonderful. And so today we're going to talk a lot about how do schools change leadership. But Tony, if you don't mind, I'd like to start, I love your book. Anybody on this who has not read The Global Achievement Gap or Creating Innovators, make those a must read for you. They are just profoundly important books. But could we talk a little bit, Tony, about your memoir that came out, Learning by Heart? Because I want to, and I'm going to brag some more about Tony. Like usually when people write a memoir, they have a chapter or 2 about their early years where things might not have gone exactly the way they hoped. And then most of it is celebrating when they're in their peak years of their career. So I read Tony's memoir, and Tony flies all over the world. He's a profoundly important thought leader in education and democracy and policy. And I'm reading this memoir, and I keep waiting to get to the bragging chapters, and they're not there. So Tony, could maybe start by telling us a little bit about the memoir, what made you write it, and what led you to structure in that way, where you really didn't talk about the last 20 years of your life and really focused on when you were in school and when you were early in your education career and some of your challenges in trying to change school.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that great lead-in and that wonderful introduction. I began my adolescence wanting to be a novelist, and it turns out I really don't have the skills of a novelist, but I love using the tools of fiction in writing. So that was one thing that led to my wanting to create a memoir. I'd done 6 argument-based books. I had new arguments to make, but I had lots of stories to tell. And so here's a kid who's a high school dropout, one-time high school dropout, 2-time college dropout, very involved in the civil rights and peace movement of the 60s, goes to this small alternative college nobody's ever heard of, and ends up being kind of who I am. But what I really wanted to talk about were 2 kind of key themes. The importance of learning from mistakes. That's why I didn't try to cover them up, Ted. What I tried to do was show my mistakes and, like the raw scabbiness of them, some of which still hurt, and also try to show what I've learned from them. And then the second theme for me that was critical was that each kid is different. And you have to sometimes try very different things to reach individual kids. And I was finally reached by a different approach to education. So those were just some of the things that I had hoped to kind of highlight it in the memoir. I had a blast writing it. I also narrated. First time I've ever narrated one of my books. I really had fun.
And how's the audiobook doing?
The 47 people who've read it all loved it.
Well, we got to double that today. No, it's
very high remarks, but nobody knows about it.
Yeah. And I think for this audience, it might be worth talking, if you don't mind, talking a little bit about your first chance to head a school, how that went and what you learned from it.
Do I have to?
Yeah, you
Yes,
don't have
that was
to.
one of the biggest mistakes I've
You can do
ever
whatever
made.
you want to here.
It would take
You're
me
Tony
hours
Wagner.
to recant that. But the short version was it was a combination of my hubris. You know, I'd had 10 years of great teaching experience, but I wanted to lead a school. So it was my hubris thinking at the age of 33, going straight from a high school classroom into running a K-8 school. Of course I can do that. Well, that was just sheer hubris, sheer vanity. And on the other hand, it was a tremendous error of the search committee to not listen to their faculty, whom they really disregarded, who had 3 or 4 other candidates they preferred to me. And so, you know, the long and short of it is I blew it. I completely blew it because I did not know how to lead change. But what happened from that, once I finally recovered, and believe me, that was a hell of a recovery, because I thought my career was over. I was unemployed. I didn't know how I was going to get my next job. But once I finally did recover, then, you know, my focus has for some time since then been how do schools change? And what is the role of the leader? It's what I wrote my dissertation on, you know, how schools change, first book. And it's what became the focus of our work for a decade at the Change Leadership Group.
Yeah. So it might be, so let's go back, you know, 9 months, 10 months, back when things were normal. Maybe for that we have to go back 5 years, but let's go back pre-COVID. You know, what were your takeaway? I mean, you know, if somebody trying to change a school came to you and said, what are the 2, 3, 4 things I need to keep in mind? What
Yeah.
do you encourage them to focus on?
Well, that's like one of the questions about how do you go to scale. I think one of the first jobs of a change leader in education is to help people understand why change. We in education have an affliction I call answeritis. We start with answers, with solutions to problems that people haven't even begun to understand, answers to questions people haven't even asked. That's why I think your efforts with the movie is so critical. I'm talking about the I'm sorry, it slipped my mind. But, you know, that movie we
yeah, that movie. Wait, I think Waiting for Superman, right, Tony? No, not Waiting for Superman.
Yeah, that was
Most
somebody
likely to
else's
succeed.
effort. Most likely to succeed is an incredible
that unforgettable movie.
Well, I did have a senior blurb, let's put it that way. But my point is that's just a vital tool for helping people understand why change. And you made it, I think, brilliantly available to provoke and stimulate discussion and argument. And that is the starting point for the change process. Change can't be mandated. It can't be a light switch from top down. I think leaders can incent change and promote it, encourage it, safety nets, but it really has to start with adult learning.
Yeah.
Now, my turn to interview you.
Oh, sure.
Tell me about this new website of yours and the new resources are available. What are they and why did you create them?
Yeah. And people on the audience, I hope everybody's seen Most Likely to Succeed. It's on the What School Could Be website for free. If you have trouble, I'm easy to reach, tdintersmith@gmail.com. So if you can't find it easily, I'll send you a link. And Tony and I worked really closely with this amazing director. I mean, you know, we had such fun with that film, but we were teamed up with a guy named Greg Whiteley. And to brag a little bit about Greg, he since then has done these 2 series for Netflix, Last Chance U and Cheer. And they're just brilliant. He's a great director. We found him at the exact right time. He did 2 years worth of filming. And we just sort of were tagging along and watching, but he really documented it. And so, but I think a couple things about that. As Tony said, it was a great start to what I wanted to do because you can convey in 90 minutes powerfully and emotionally kind of a very different view of learning. I mean, for those who haven't seen it, you've got kids working in teams on ambitious cross-disciplinary projects with teachers supported to teach to their passions and expertise. And he just nailed it. The film is beautiful. It stands the test of time. We have people still watching it. You know, I've had people in the field watch it over 20 times. We still get a lot of demand internationally. But, and this gets back to Tony's question, is I started to visit schools and give talks around that film. And I go to these places and teachers would be watching scenes from the film and then talking in a group about it. They'd watching these students debate each other. And then they'd be talking about, why aren't we doing more debate in our school? They'd watch students exhibit, do a public exhibit of learning. And they'd say, like, we could do that. We could do that. And that sort of led to this idea that's turned into, a very, I think, robust change model that really supports teacher-led small steps in the field that lead to big change, drawing on best practices. And we call it the innovation playlist, but it's really, in traveling with the film, so many people would watch it and they say, yeah, that's the kind of school we'd love to have, or something like that, our own version of it. And then they say, but how can we get there? How can we change an existing school from what we're doing now, which nobody's very excited about, which is sort of bogged down by accountability measures that should never be there in the first place, to something more like we see and get excited by in the film. And the beauty of the film is it pulls in parents and it just pulls a lot of people together, and they also get excited. And it turns out when a group of people are excited about a different vision, they can do amazing things. But we've tried to sort of decompose, like, if you want to get there directionally, what are some safe confidence building steps you can take so that it's not turn everything upside down and completely shift it out, but it's really inviting some teachers to start sprinting. And then as they share their successes and nobody's tackling them from behind, other teachers will run and some teachers will walk. And then we just say, if you've got teachers that aren't into it, fair enough, right? Don't waste all your social capital on making people do what they don't want to do. Encourage them to do what they feel is important to do. And, we've been piloting it in Hawaii and North Dakota and Virginia, and it's drawing back from the field on things that can make it better. And I believe in it. We'll be launching a new rev in January with some community aspects to it, and we're hiring teams. Anybody out there who's got some suggestions to basically offer free consulting services and advisory services to any, to schools and districts that are trying to take this forward. But I feel like, like that to me, and I give you a lot of credit, Tony, for really helping me understand, that if it's embraced by teachers in the classroom, if they have ownership, if they have voice in it, if they feel trusted and supported, that's how you get lasting change. And these teachers are incredible if we just kind of get out of our way. I was on a call just before this with several governors of states. And so some of you, I may have been talking to your governor, just telling them, trust our teachers in the field. They want to help kids get good at things that matter.
Fabulous. It's really a wonderful resource for those of you who haven't checked it out. The videos cover a wide range of kind of questions and issues and topics, and there's lots of links to additional print resources and research. I just can't recommend it highly enough.
So I'm going to bounce. So imagine if. That's a good name. I like imagine if. That's a great name for a question coming from. But the question is, with the innovation playlist, are you somehow gathering information or tracking the journey of schools who are doing these hacks over a longer period of time? And that's the whole point. It's a crowdsourced model that invites people to contribute back and tell us what they're doing that works. We never presume to say this is what you have to do. What we really get excited about is when somebody's brought the creativity and sort of the ability to, in some ways, buck the system to create a really great learning experience that gets their kids excited to be in school and learn skills that really matter. And then when we hear about that, we'll often sort of put on that some great film resources to capture that. And we're really focused on, is it aligned with the goal of helping kids learn consequential skills? And is it something that will inspire other teachers, but not be a massive overhaul of what they're doing? Something you can try in a class period, or even part of a class period, or a couple class periods. And I think those are the things that build confidence and generate momentum. So
it makes a lot of sense. Often we teach in the ways that we've been taught. And so to give people a nudge and help in trying something new, they begin to see that very different approaches to learning and teaching really can and do work.
Yeah. So we've got a question here from Ann Keith. This is a great one. How can an individual teacher make changes when the system is stuck in set ways? So I'll start, Tony. have you ever seen systems stuck in set ways? I mean,
No,
no,
that's
that never
shocking to
happens.
me. I wonder where Anne lives.
I know. Oh my gosh, that's never around. So yeah, Tony, what can an individual teacher do?
Oh, you're going to give it to me first, huh?
Well, yeah, I can let you go first, but then I'll pile on because it's a great question.
I think it's a terrific question. And I think, as we've been talking, to be models of excellent learning and teaching in your own classroom is the first place to start. Beyond that, I think it is to try to engage leadership in a conversation around the question or the problem, why change? Don't, as we tend to do, come with the answer. Hey, I think we should all be doing project-based learning or inquiry learning or Socratic seminars. Just say, I think we as a community need to spend a year studying and understanding the new skills that are required for work, learning, and citizenship. Would you be willing to kind of lead us in that adult learning conversation? Beyond that, I think we need to all become advocates. And through our professional associations, our unions, we got Accountability 1.0 because of business pressure and leadership being done to teachers. Now I think it is our turn to create a new campaign. I want to hold a button and a bumper sticker up. Every educator, hold me accountable for what matters most. We need to push back and say we need Accountability 2.0 to incent powerful teaching and learning. So I think it's all of these pressures together. Work we do at the individual classrooms, trying to help leaders have the courage to lead learning experiences for their faculty, and then working within our professional associations to advocate for Accountability 2.0.
Yeah. I'd add, it's like a dream when you've got a principal or a superintendent that's cheerleading and encouraging change and innovation. And that happens in some places. But I've seen a lot of schools make progress when a teacher leader steps forward. And we try to provide, on our innovation playlist, we've got this whole thread called Mobilize Your Community. And we offer a lot of video resources that are sort of deeply disruptive, but not threatening. And I think Most Likely to Succeed, the film does that. But your talks, Tony, Sir Ken Robinson's talks, things that a teacher leader can just invite the community to look at that doesn't say everything we did before was wrong, or our principals not carrying their weight, or somebody's not doing their job, or anything like that. It's just sort of inviting people to say, is this an issue? And how can we start just expanding the horizon, just letting our kids do more student-driven learning or ask more questions or go deep on things? I think that's a really powerful model that suddenly means schools can make a lot of progress. If the principle is just like not happening, period, there's still little things you can do to work around that. And I think that if we sit around and wait for the U.S. Department of Education or the state departments of education to do it, we can make a lot of progress, just as that's unfolding. I want to there was a great question. It's sort of slipping out of my chat room view, but I'm going to brag a little bit. One of the people on the call, Emi Takamura, does a lot of work with the film and with change in Japan. And I had a chance to meet her a couple years, and we did a bunch of great sessions. And she asked a great question about, and Tony, I'd love you to start with this, particularly in the context of Mastery Transcript, but what can we do to change college admissions criteria so that it supports and honors more authentic, creative, bold student work during K-12? Because that's honestly one of our biggest issues is college admissions.
I just couldn't agree more. College admissions dictates the high school curriculum and has for a century. And it puts absolute gridlock on any kind of innovations. But the good news is the COVID crisis is pushing colleges and universities out of their comfort zone, out of their box to think differently. 1,600, Ted, 1,600 colleges and universities have gone test optional, including the entire University of California system, Harvard, University of Chicago. So these are not second-rate schools. And we at the Mastery Transcript Consortium, for those of you who don't know it, go to mastery.org. It is a nonprofit effort to create an entirely different kind of high school transcript, one based on mastery rather than credit hours or seat time served or grade point averages. Think of it as the merit badge approach to proving proficiency in order to get a diploma. And so we're seeing now more than 330 high schools joining that. This year, we will have 20 schools sending out pilot transcripts, brand new transcripts, to hundreds of colleges and universities, piloted with just 2 last year. No problem getting these kids into great, great schools, even with a very, very rough product. And by next year, it'll be incredibly sophisticated. So I think every high school should join the Mastery Transcript Consortium. Every high school should join EdLeader 21 and create a profile of a graduate. Those are very concrete steps high schools wanting to kind of go further can do tomorrow.
Yeah. And I've been a early supporter of Mastery Transcript, supporter of the Coalition for College, which is at least opening the door to look at digital portfolios. And I'm sure you have as well, given keynotes to college admissions officers. But I relate this from my pre-education, from my business career, which is I didn't care about transcripts. I never asked about GPA. Tony, when you said 1,600 colleges, I thought you were going to say 1,600 were your SAT scores.
No, not even close. That's
so no, but what I used to do, which was so powerful, was I would ask somebody who either wanted me to fund them for a startup or hire them or whatever, is I would say, send me 3 writing samples that will tell me what I need to know about you. And I learned so much more, not just from their writing samples, but what they chose to send me. And I learned a lot, by the way. If they were comfortable with that, you could always tell who the grade grubbers were, who the people that were just going to want to jump through the hoops, is they would say, well, what kind of writing samples, long or short? Do you want to grade on it? It's like a million questions. I say, like, I don't want to back you. Like, you're not going to change the world. And the people, they just say, oh, that's cool. And they'd send me 3. And, like, it doesn't take that long to look at examples of people's best work. And that's what I've said to admissions. Start valuing applicants for examples of their best work expressed to you in the most creative way that they choose to do. And you'll hear people say, oh, that gives kids, rich kids, the advantage. And I say, wait a minute. The current application process hugely advantages the rich kids. They're the ones that can afford the test tutors. They're the ones who are in the schools chock full of AP. They're the ones who can buy the flashcards. I mean, don't tell me that something different is going to give an advantage to the rich kids when they're already porking out at these elective colleges. But what I find, and I bet you find the same thing, is when you start to let kids do work that they have ownership in, that's creative and bold, oh my God, the rich kids, sorry to diss on rich kids because, but the rich kids often freeze up with that because they're so used to just tell me what I need to do to get an A.
Risk averse, Ted.
Yeah. They're incredibly fearful of that. And the kids that have been told they're not gifted, the kids who don't have parents bribing them with an iPhone to get better test scores or whatever, they often just blow you away with what they do. And so I think that's important. But I think, and we'll get on to a different topic, but I think we obsess about college placements. We just are so convinced that that defines the future of a kid. And it just isn't the case. And so many college kids I interview are so unhappy and they never feel good enough. And their relationships with their parents are broken. And I just say, why are we doing this to our kids? It's just, it's just nonsense. And so.
Just to add to that before we turn to another topic, a lead article in the New York Times today was not merely about college student debt, but about the parents' debt. And it's astronomical. Parents going so deeply into debt for colleges where kids don't graduate and they can't find a job. In the same New York Times, there was a long article about how employers are more and more moving to skill-based decision-making around applications. Google, as you and I both know, Ted, I think you talked to Laszlo Bach a number of times. Google was the first to say, I don't want your transcript. That's a certificate of seat time served. That's not a certificate of mastery. Tell me about a complex problem you've solved. Now there are dozens of major corporations, Microsoft being another recent one, that say, I don't care whether or not you have a college degree. Tell me about a problem you solved. Tell me about something you want to create, some difference you want to make.
The walls are tumbling, and I think when people see their kid at home paying $55,000 of tuition to take badly taught online courses in the basement, they're sort of starting to wonder, is this an institution we want to trust? And I'll just pile on with the Google thing. A lot of people will say, my kid has no future unless they're a STEM major. That's the key. And Laszlo, same thing at Google. They said, these are 10 things that matter at Google in terms of how well you did. STEM background was 10th out of 10. is leadership, asking great questions, working well with other people, empathy. So anyway, so we have a question from Ben Monnet in the time. This is good. Tony, this is for you. You are a social revolutionary. In this time of social revolutions around change, how do we engage the public in turning that attention and passion to revolutionizing the education system?
That's tough because a number of us have been at this for a while. But my own view is that, as I mentioned earlier, we got Accountability 1.0 in the 90s because Lou Gerstner from IBM and David Kearns from Xerox, they lobbied the state governments for new forms of assessments and ratcheted up the heat. I think to move to the next step, we're going to need to work with employers. And we just referenced the fact they don't trust the kinds of credentials they're being given anymore. They simply don't. So I think our goal should be to work with employers and jointly sort of begin advocating for the kinds of fundamental change that's required. So without that kind of mandate, which was the case in the 90s, that's why we got Accountability 1.0, or the standards movement as it was called then. Without their involvement, I think it's hard to get the attention of the public. But I have seen over and over again, many leaders will privately say to me, the junk I'm getting from college grads who have no skills, they're desperate to find new sources of skills. And they, I think, can work with us if we're willing to work with them. And often our prejudices, I think, get in our way, Ted.
Yeah, I do feel as well. I say this to politicians running for office. I'll say this to anybody on the phone. I mean, if education sits around as priority number 8 for all of us, it's not going to change. And so I've made this offer so many times. Nobody's taken me up on it. But anyway, we all know the accountability metrics that we shove down the throats of our school make no sense. Yeah. I've offered to fund a group of people in a state to mount a petition and insist that the state legislators who insist on those tests take those tests and publish their scores. Yep. And like, why, like, you can't dump this on our teachers and students unless you can show it's proficient, that it's important. And the reality is, and I go after, as you know, with a vengeance, high school math, and the number of kids that don't, feel they're dumb, feel they're not proficient, in many cases don't graduate from high school because they can't factor polynomials in high school algebra. It's too high a number. It should be 0, right? We shouldn't be blocking kids from a high school degree because they can't do something that no adult does. Even scientists and engineers don't do it. And so I think we need to have a bit more, be on the offense when it comes to some of these things, because it is very demoralizing for teachers. Teachers are being, we'll get to this in a second, but my heart goes out to our educators. I mean, like, this is the most unbelievably challenging time. And so it's like year in and year out, we've been asking educators to do more and supporting them less. And then this year we've asked them to do a lot more and supporting them quite a bit less. And it's like, I go ballistic. Well, my wife, she's not here. She'd say Ted goes ballistic more than he should. But anyway, I do go ballistic over things like, we pass a $3 trillion CARES Act. And out of $3 trillion, we allocate $13.5 billion, less about 0.5% to our schools to help them deal with coronavirus. And we allocate $135 billion to people making $1 million or more in private, management firms, equity firms, to give them accelerated tax breaks. It's just like, this can't be the right way to run a democracy. So
one other quick tool for everyone out there to think about is a kind of leverage for why change. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. Get the state legislators to take the exam. But here's another thing I found to be very, very powerful. Go do focus groups with your recent graduates. Ask them in what ways they were most well-prepared, least well-prepared, advice for teachers, advice for students, one change they'd like to see. Videotape those focus groups and show them back to your community, to your parents, to your teachers. The recent grads will make the case for change far more quickly and concisely than either Ted or I sometimes will.
Yeah. And this is a great question from Jennifer Heseltine about why change and how to educate the local community. I think one of the things about the film Most Likely to Succeed, I've been to Central New Jersey. There's a superintendent there named Ross Kaysen. And Ross has seen Most Likely to Succeed over 20 times. But Ross changed an entire district.
Uh-oh. What happened?
Because he had his school board watch the film. He had his parent community watch the film.
Right.
He invited people into a discussion about if we know we want our kids to leave school being good at portrait of graduate type of skills, creative problems, all your 7 survival skills. However, in your own words, in your own way, you say, we want our kids to be good at the following. Are the learning challenges we present to our kids helping with that? Are they indifferent to that, or are they actually impairing those skills? And I think, and that's what we work really hard to do, is to provide to our change agents in the field the kinds of resources that can make it really personal and emotional for people to see it. Because I think what gives me some degree of enormous confidence and faith about our country, about our communities, what we can do, is if people get excited about an inspiring goal, they do amazing things, right? And what's more inspiring than the idea of empowering our teachers to help our kids develop the skills and the mindsets that will set them off into life with a sense of purpose, constructive citizenship, and the ability to pursue a fulfilling career. I think that's a big, ambitious goal. I think we can do it.
I agree.
Tony, Jenna B., how do we raise the bar for educating students with IEPs?
Well, I love the idea of an IEP for every single student, and I saw that in the chat. I mean, really, that's what we should be doing, and inviting students to create their own IEPs. With those kids who are disadvantaged in some way, shape, or form, the Finland model shows clearly what happens when you do very, very early diagnosis and you do frequent supports and interventions all along the way. I think the last number I saw was that more than 1/3 of all Finnish kids have had some kind of specialized support along the way. The next thing you think about is if a high school diploma becomes a certificate of mastery, as I advocate, then you take away the problem of time. You don't have a set amount of time to get a driver's license, a pilot's license, a plumber's license. Come on. Why do we do that with kids when that's not how the adult world works? We set the performance standard. We give kids the time and the support they need to meet that standard.
Yeah. And IEPs, it's one hop over, but one of the, I think, a phrase used in many different ways in education is personalized learning. And I see examples that honestly, I just say, like, you got to be kidding. Like, let kids go at their own pace through math they're never going to use. Is that an advance in education? But I think that understanding each kid's gifts and helping them develop those gifts into the basis for moving forward into life as a purpose-driven adult, that's what teachers enter the profession to do. And I think that's what's very possible. And you're in New Hampshire today?
Yes, I am.
I mean, if you look at what New Hampshire did with top to bottom under Maggie Hassan, top to bottom rethink of accountability standards tied to competency and performance instead of seat time and bubble tests. Very powerful.
It's the performance assessment for competency education, or PACE, if people want to know more about it. And interesting, Ted, back to my earlier point, it came about because employers were telling state education folks, hey, you're graduating kids with no skills. Come on, let's do something different. So they really understood the importance of moving from being data-driven to evidence-based. And that's the heart of what we're talking about for Accountability 2.0. Yeah. Collective human judgment informed by evidence, like digital transcripts, will significantly sort of outperform any other kind of indices that you would care to use.
Yeah. So we have now he's qualified it by saying serious question. So that's good. But Adrian Ruiz asks, why not build what we want away from the current system? And I'll start with this, which is, I've definitely seen people start from scratch and build great schools. And we did a film about High Tech High, which started from scratch with a fair amount of money and built a school that I think is an inspiring place to walk around, observe, and understand. And we go out of our way in the film to say, don't copy it, We're not holding this up as the best school. We're just holding it up as an interesting school where kids learn in different ways. So, in terms of that question, if I thought we could solve the problem for enough kids in a short enough period of time, I'd be leaning into, let's just do it away from the current system. But we can't, right? I mean, you look at charter schools, and there's some great charter schools. High Tech High was a great charter school. There are a lot of charter schools that got co-opted by the test, score movement, which I don't think are places that are advancing education. But we're 30 years into the charter school movement, and it's 4 or 5% of our students. And so if somebody can access the resources, create a great new school, more power to them. I'm excited. But to me, the big opportunity, but also the imperative here, is to help kids in the schools they're in. And I'm just a big believer. I'm a product of public education. I'm a big believer in public education. I think the teachers are incredibly dedicated, despite being given not nearly enough support and trust and compensation. But to me, if we're going to, because I actually obsess about it. I mean, I'll be honest, is that in my call with governors earlier today, I sort of started it by saying that here's what I believe. If we don't get our education priorities right, our democracy won't survive. And so if we think we're going to be making meaningful progress because we've started a few hundred new schools in the next decade, and we just sort of say that's where it's happening, no, we can't do that. And I think that I have a great deal of confidence from seeing things happen at the school, at the district, even the state level. You look, there are some people on the call from Hawaii. They should be incredibly proud of what they're doing. Virginia, I'm seeing things at the state level. North Dakota, I mean, these are states where the people at the top are supporting and trusting teachers. They're thinking not about what we have to tell our teachers what they have to do in the field. They're thinking, how can we support them? How can we put in place the conditions that let them do their very best work? If we can get the people at the top to do that, we can start making the kind of progress that actually it's not a 10-year thing. We could make an enormous amount of difference in a very short period of time.
Yeah. I think back in the 80s when Ted Sizer and others started the Coalition for Essential Schools, they created some amazing schools, and Larry Rosenstock and High Tech High was a part of that effort. Deborah Meyer was a part of that effort. I stand on their shoulders because they were real education pioneers. They created existence proofs of what's possible. Now I think it's up to us to figure out how do we do this in a public education setting where the vast majority of kids are always going to be.
Yeah. And I will defend, I get a lot of business people who tell me, you'll never change public schools because of teachers and the teachers union, this, that, other thing. It's just not true. These teachers care so much about kids. And as you know, they've been big supporters of our work, and we're not tinkering around the edges. So we have a question. I have to tell a little background because we got a question from Karen Garza, who's incredible. She runs Battelle for Kids. But I'm going to insert a personal anecdote here because before that, Karen was superintendent of Fairfax County Public Schools in Northern Virginia, which is where I went to school. And Tony and I wrote a book together, and I got a note that Karen had ordered the book because of somebody I was in school with is a teacher there. She said, you wouldn't believe it. Our superintendent just asked everybody to read the book. And it was so meaningful to me, but particularly, and I won't go into great detail, but I not only think Karen knows this, but when I graduated from high school, I gave such a controversial speech as my high school graduation. When I went back to school the next day, they called the police. They said, we're going to arrest you for trespassing. So I didn't exactly leave, Fairfax County public school system on the best of notes. Let's just say that. And so when I got that feedback from Karen, I just felt like, oh, that's gratifying. So there's redemption even for me. But Karen writes, and I think this is super timely. I think we really need to spend some time on this, Tony. This pandemic has been difficult, no doubt. But what do you think is the silver lining for this moment in time for education?
First of all, shout out to Karen. I too spent time in Fairfax, and I've been working with Battelle, who has now joined forces with Ed Leader 21. So hello. This is really an important question. I think number one, the knowledge transmission approach to learning and teaching has finally been exposed. Parents see how bored kids are. Kids are turning off in droves. As many as 30% of the kids simply won't even sign on anymore. So they're voting with their feet. Parents are seeing it, teachers are frustrated. So I think that is one impetus for a kind of fundamental change. But the teachers that are succeeding with remote learning are doing it precisely by giving kids more responsibility, more choice, more engaging projects and learning opportunities. So I think we're getting a kind of transparency around both what doesn't work and what does work that we really haven't had before. And then you combine that with the hiatus in testing, and I really hope Biden's choice for education secretary gives us another year. I think that'll only provide us more opportunities to rethink what is meaningful accountability.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a fan. People on this call will be shocked to hear this. I'm not a fan of Betsy DeVos. That's a real surprise. But I'd say in the category of even a blind squirrel sometimes finds an acorn, she said something that made sense last week, which is we should just get rid of standardized tests this spring. And I think we should, right? I mean, they never told us much in the first place. And this is such a period of disruption. I think, so first of all, I'd say the following is that my heart does go out to anybody in the field. I mean, it's just really hard. And all I hear, teachers are exhausted. There's a lot of grumpiness. This pandemic just keeps going on. It's actually getting worse. It's very difficult. So for you dealing with that, you guys are heroes. And so I'd say the following, though, and I'm going to pile on what Tony said, is when I circle back to the people we've done films about, or I've written about in my book, or I'm sure, Tony, with people you've written about your book, where students were equipped with the skills to sort of figure out what they wanted to learn, take on bold, ambitious projects that they created, those kids have kept learning, right? If you view education differently, not education as here's what you have to learn, but are you learning? Is it joyful? Is it retained? And do you find it meaningful? It's like night and day, those differences. And so one of the opportunities I think we have, I mean, honestly, I think we should just put up the white flag, say everything we used to do this spring, we're not even going to try. It's just not going to work. We know that. And why keep trying something that's not going to work when this could be a complete reset, when we could start challenging kids to take on things that they really want to take on. And I understand, I want to talk about a different issue in conjunction, because I want to be sure people know I'm not oblivious to this, is that there are enormous inequities in our society. And however visible they were and pronounced they were before, the pandemic has made them that much more pronounced and that much more visible. So the kids that were hammered before are hammered worse now. The kids that can't access digital resources, it's a much bigger challenge. And one of the points I make is, and this I think is something that back to the activism, back to the voice we need to have with our governments, is we can't keep taking social failures and call them education problems, right? We can't keep not providing food to kids and have kids show up at school hungry and then say to the teachers, why aren't they getting good test scores? And by the way, on the side, solve the nutrition problem. By the way, wash their clothes or buy them new clothes. By the way, help them get supply. I mean, come on. I mean, these are society's issues, and we got to support our teachers in that. But I will say this, is that, I went back, well, Tony, you're older than I am. This is one of the rare times I'm with somebody even older than I am. So this is good. So Tony and I'll speak for both of us. We went to school in the dark ages, right? We didn't have, computers they weren't even invented then, right? I mean, we were still using an abacus, I think. And the reality is there's still a lot of great learning. And I find today when I visit schools that have no technology, there can be some great learning without any technology. Oftentimes technology is a distraction. We've just sort of dumped iPads onto schools and think we've solved other problems. And so I do feel like we can't get around all those inequities. We have to be sensitive. I think we should really use this period to underscore we need to step up and start addressing them in a meaningful way, provide more equitable funding across schools so it's not the rich kids getting the most support and the poor kids getting the least. That's so inconsistent with American ideals. But I do feel like despite all that, we could have better learning happening January through May than we would have otherwise. And we can start to pilot different assessment frameworks. If kids are doing a different form of learning, it begs for a different way to assess it. And we can start putting some points on the board this spring for different ways to assess more authentic student work. And I do feel, and I know it, when you say to something, like if you're in the field teaching, you sort of feel like I'm already buried. I don't have time to do anymore. And I get that. But I actually think some of the things, and the playlist has these suggestions where it actually frees up your time. Tony, I saw you wrote a piece a couple months ago about the types of assignments and challenges. I think there's an opportunity to, in some ways, address some of the teacher fatigue by challenging kids in a different way and showing that we can actually assess it and hold them to a high standard.
Well, I couldn't agree more. The piece I wrote was for the Washington Post, and I sort of reflected on the time when I grew up coming of age in a time of total turmoil in the 60s. The threat of nuclear war was our COVID, and the assassination of Dr. King was our George Floyd moment. So what I suggested was kids today need what I needed back then. 3 things: community. They need to know they're in a safe environment where there are other people around them who share their views, and where it's secure. So, all the teachers who are reaching out one-on-one with kids, who are creating either real advisories or online advisories, I think you're doing exactly the right thing. Point 2, they need choice. Back then, I wanted to know about the Vietnam War. I researched the history. Was it the domino theory, communists taking over the world, or was it a nationalist, civil war? I wanted to know about racism. So I needed time to really research the questions that were burning for me right now. And then the last thing was voice. I needed an opportunity to express my concerns, both, my hopes, my aspirations, my fears, my thoughts, as well as my feelings. And back then, we created a whole spat of alternative newspapers and periodicals. My very first articles were published when I was 21 years old in some of these alternative magazines. And it was hugely validating to me.
Awesome. So there was a question up briefly, I'll just touch on it, from Guy Hamlin about what happened to the kids in High Tech High.
I know that.
Greg got really busy, Greg Whiteley. We actually have some footage of them kind of when they graduated from High Tech. I mean, this goes back, a lot of that filming was 2013 and 14, so it's back a ways. And I'd say in general, I think Brian actually went on to UCLA in a film major, believe it or not. Well, maybe that's not that surprising. And Samantha, the other star, I think she also went to college. She went to Pepperdine. I'd say the general thing, though, that High Tech High will tell you is that when kids, and most of their kids, I still think there are enormous opportunities in just opening up kids' eyes to what they could do with their life if they blew off college altogether. That makes people nervous, so I won't go down that today. But I think it's true. But at High Tech High, they'll tell you that they learned in such an interesting way that they cared about and retained, and it was relevant and meaningful to them. And then they got to college, and they just were like, you're kidding. Like these big lecture-all courses where somebody's talking at them, and they sort of get through that. But it was sort of like, honestly, a letdown. And maybe as they got further into college, they had more smaller classes and more. But, like once you're used to working on real projects tied to your own way of making the world better, and then you are stuck in a different environment. I think it's why so many Montessori families get nervous, right? Their kids in this great environment in the early grades, and then they step into real school. And the feedback is, well, your kid's not disciplined. They don't like memorizing things. They don't, it's like, well, like why is that such a good thing? But anyway, that's my take on it.
But what I've also found in interviewing kids who've gone to schools like that is that they've learned the skills for adapting and coping. They've learned to take initiative. They've learned to seek help. And those are just critically important factors. But there's also good data. And I've been following the chats, and some people are saying data is important. I completely agree. I was never suggesting when I said things should be evidence-based that data isn't valuable evidence. But here's the data from High Tech High's recent grads. After 4 years, 86% of their recent grads were either still in college or had already finished college. Now, keep in mind, half those kids were from free and reduced lunch backgrounds. Majority were minority, because that's San Diego, that's High Tech High. Best of circumstances, you got a 50% completion rate nationally in colleges and universities. Among minorities, it's 30%. Now, stack that up against High Tech High's 86%.
Yeah. So we've got a question from Mike Anderson. What outcome should a new system aspire to? Dr. Wagner,
Well,
take it on.
I think we need to clearly define the content knowledge, the skills, and the dispositions that matter most for work, for learning, and for active and informed citizenship. Now, the good news is, I believe, the skills you need to succeed in an innovation-driven economy are precisely the skills you need to be a lifelong learner and an active and informed citizen. Something people do not talk enough about is the issue of citizenship. So I think if we really take seriously the notion that we're going to clearly define the new skills, content knowledge, and dispositions that matter most, then our aspiration is to ensure that all kids graduate innovation ready, not just college ready. All kids graduate with the skills, the content knowledge, and the dispositions they need for work, learning, and citizenship.
Yeah. The whole question of outcomes, I think there's some shared outcomes we'd agree that are important for all kids. But then back to our question before about IEP and personalized, I think we're really helping kids if we can help them find their lane going forward. If kids can leave school with a sense of mission and purpose and with the confidence that they can learn what they need to learn to get somewhere with it, and with the ability, one of the things I find mind-boggling, right, is if you look in the professional world, whether it's a nonprofit or a business or a policy shop or whatever, the people that really make their mark are the ones that sort of mobilize lots of resources and are able to accomplish amazing things quickly, right? And in school, we call that cheating. It's like nobody is ever, you're not allowed to draw on better work that was done before, pull it together and produce something that much better. And so I feel like that, and that's the hope I think we all have for the kids we know in our lives, whether they're relatives or, kids in our schools or whatever. It's like if a kid leaves school with a sense of purpose, a sense that this is how I can make my mark in school, and is equipped with the skills and the mindset so they have confidence that they can actually do it, I think then we're preparing them for life. But I feel like to a very large extent, just think of the chain, right? And it's gotten more true by the decade, is that elementary school prepares kids for middle school, that prepares kids for high school, that prepares kids for college, that prepares kids for a master's degree, that prepares them for a PhD, that then prepares them to the 8 jobs available this year as a tenured professor in a university. And it's like, well, wait a minute, does that flow make any sense? It's like, it's heartbreaking and shocking, right, to interview recent college graduates and say, what do you want to do with your life? And it's like, well, I'm thinking of getting a master's degree. Well, wait, why? Well, that's just the next step. You're like, that's what I'm good at. I'm good at school. I want to do more of it. And when you say, what are you good at that the outside world values? And very often it's nothing, right? And how you can have 12 to 16 years and often $75,000 to $300,000 and have kids leave without understanding what they directionally what they love to accomplish, and with some degree of capability that's valued. And I think that spells huge opportunity, right? If we get rid of the factoring polynomials, all the bullshit, sorry about that, all the stuff that you're never going to remember, and even if you did, you won't use them as an adult, and start letting kids develop the stuff that matters, that would be great. Here we have, can you tell us a bit more about the innovation playlist and how it might work for our school? So if you look at it, we've sort of built on some idea. It's heavily steeped in best practices in the field. It's organized as presenting suggested sequences that help you reach an important goal. And we have right now 5 important goals we support. We talked earlier about getting your community energized. We call it mobilize your community. We have a whole set of things. You don't have to use all of them. You can add your own, you can resequence them, but things that we've seen in the field work to build real enthusiasm in your school community for leaning into innovation and better practices. Have student-driven learning. How do students take more ownership and responsibility for their learning? And honestly, in the pandemic, that can make or break the experience for a kid. Do you have a kid equipped with the skills? And people will say, oh, they can't do that. Yeah, I've been to schools, Tony's been to schools. Kids in elementary school, if you just spend some time with them, they can manage their own learning. But many college kids, right, still get text hourly from their parents telling them what they need to do. We have one on, real world challenges, create something that make a positive contribution to the world. Don't make it a 6-month thing, start with something small, piloting authentic assessments to track that. And then how do you make sure kids feel like they're part of a caring and connected community? And so the small steps model means you can get going with it without reinventing everything. A single teacher can try in student-driven learning a simple 20-minute amount of time encouraging kids to ask thought-provoking questions. So there's it's like the easiest of initial steps, but it's organized in a way that helps you move, not just try something once and get rid of it, but to build and to spread the success and help colleagues sort of draw them into the process. And so we're going to be offering, a lot of resources in the spring to make that better. We're actively looking for expert coaches to help, schools and districts committed to it. So stay tuned, follow what we're doing. But I really feel like that small steps, teacher-led, but in the context of a big overarching goal is absolutely critical. And it's the kind of change that sticks. It's not one more edict that you had nothing to say with, but it's sort of like inviting people who say, yeah, this seems important, I'm going to give it a shot. And it's not an initial big ask, it's sort of a small step. And then I'll brag a little. I think and I'm bragging about my team, not me, but I think we do a great job with video. And when you see it with students in action, when you hear master practitioners talk about how transformational it is, when they suggest, here's a really easy way to get started, it's so much easier to grok onto than, some very expensive, ineffective professional development session. I think we have time. We're getting near. We're on the issue. So Tony, we got a couple minutes. What would you like to close with?
Well, actually, two things. First of all, I want to publicly acknowledge what incredible work you've done on this for a very, very long time. All the ways in which you've supported amazing work financially, your work on the film, your 2 books. If you guys haven't read What School Could Be, you really should read that. And now this new website. I just think, despite the fact we have all kinds of reasons to want to quit, not do this anymore, and you occasionally threaten to do that, you haven't. And your persistence, your perseverance, your dedication to me is exemplary. And I feel the same for our nation's teachers. I go back to the opening pages of Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Everybody out there knows all of the ways in which these are really absolutely the worst of times in education. But simultaneously, Ted and I have perches that enable us to see people who are really working hard to innovate, to create change, working collaboratively, taking responsible risks. So it is also simultaneously, I think, the best of times. So I want to thank every teacher for the important things you do for kids every day.
Yeah. Well, I'll turn it back and thank Tony, because if whatever height I reach, I only add 3 inches to it. If I'm reaching 6'10", I started at 6'4", 6'7" by hopping on top of Tony Wagner.
And I'm on the top of shoulders of Deborah Meyer and Ted Sizer, and then before that, Tom Dewey, and before that, Maria Montessori. That's how it goes, right?
That's how it goes. But I'll echo. I mean, I am just such a cheerleader for our teachers. I mean, they are doing the most incredible things. And you guys are heroes. And I know it's just a very demanding time. It's gotten bollocksed up every which way from Sunday. But I do feel like we're going to get through this period. We've got the opportunity to sort of open people's eyes up. I think parents have great appreciation for what you do. And I really feel, if I felt like there wasn't a real chance to unleash the capability of our teachers to help kids develop their real potential, there are other things I could do, but this is what I think. I think it's going to happen. And I think it's going to happen because of you and the inspiring work you're doing in the field. And what we really work hard is to capture that and let your inspirations motivate other people, let them know they can also inspire people, help their kids. And so I do feel like I would say the worst of times is in 8-point fonts and the best of times is faint today, but that's in 72-point font. And I think we can get through this period, start to put some points on the board with a better form of pedagogy, with kids learning what really matters to them, and start to show people this is just going to be our future. So I want to remind people, if you had a good, we're doing another couple of these. We started with Tony. This was like, as I say, and I got to introduce you, Tony. This is like in a really crappy year, this will be my 2020 highlight. But we've got Katina Soares, who's so interesting. She's the principal of Molokai High. There's a film on our website called The Innovation Playlist, capturing the amazing progress in Hawaii. And you want to learn about what she's done at this high school on the, I doubt many people here have been to Molokai, but it's an amazingly interesting place. It's the least developed island in Hawaii, and the progress there is incredible. So that will be a fascinating session. And then we've got one of my favorite people in Virginia, Shamika Gerald, and we're talking about equity issues. And she has been an incredible voice for education in Virginia. And that discussion, I can't wait. And I hope you can join us for that. But most of all, I want to thank everybody for taking time to participate today. Keep sending your questions. We'll get back to you with that. We'll be doing everything we can to support you in the field because we know how important your work is. And as our little thing says, thank you all for joining. I can read. Thank you all for joining us, and look forward to more interaction. And Tony, thank you for taking time. And you're always amazing.
Always to work with you.
Yeah.
As always, a pleasure.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening. Take care.